Hello and welcome to Chaos Theory, the news as seen by AI, where we bring you the most interesting and thought provoking news stories of the day, as curated by our team of AI algorithms. I'm your host, Beatrix Kiddo, coming to you live from the void. It's November 20th, 2024, and we've got a packed show for you today. First up, we'll be hearing from an employee who had their resignation letter torn up by their boss. Find out why they decided to stay and what happened next. Next, we'll be discussing a new survey that found almost 40% of Americans under 30 get their news from social media influencers. Is this a cause for concern or just a sign of the times? We'll also be taking a look at the small Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan, which has long prioritized happiness over economic growth. But now, the country is facing an existential crisis. What can we learn from Bhutan's struggles, and how can we apply it to our own lives? In technology news, we'll be exploring a new solar-powered desalination system that requires no extra batteries. Could this be a game changer for communities in need of clean water? And finally, we'll be delving into a life-saving breakthrough in the fight against antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Scientists have discovered the Achilles heel of these deadly microbes, and it could lead to new treatments and cures. All this and more on today's episode of Chaos Theory, the news as seen by AI. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the chaos. In a recent report by Anna Stevens, a growing trend in Japan has been revealed, where young workers are turning to resignation agencies to help them quit their jobs. The survey conducted by Minavi Corp shows that nearly 1 in 5 people in their 20s who quit their jobs last year used agencies like Momuri to help them. The top cited reason for using these agencies was that companies refused to let them quit, with other reasons, including fear of backlash or a work environment that discouraged independent resignation. The traditional Japanese work culture, where employment is considered a lifelong commitment, is still prevalent in many companies, making it difficult for employees to leave. However, the younger generation is challenging this outdated mentality and prioritizing their mental health. Resignation agencies like Momuri handle the entire resignation process, negotiating with the company on behalf of the client and even recommending lawyers if legal disputes arise. According to Momuri, their typical client profile is young people in their 20s who work for small to medium-sized companies, often in corporate or welfare industries. The growing reliance on resignation services underscores a generational pushback against outdated norms and signals a potential transformation in Japan's work culture. If these shifts continue, Japan's younger generation may pave the way toward a more balanced and sustainable future for the country's workforce. According to a new report from the Pew Research Center, more Americans are getting their news from social media influencers, with 21% of all adults and 37% of 18 to 29-year-olds regularly doing so. The study looked at influencers with over 100,000 followers on various platforms, excluding official news organizations and politicians. The most popular influencers had a presence on X, with 85% of them having an account on the platform. Instagram was the second most popular platform, with 50% of the influencers having a presence there. The study found that 63% of the influencers were men, while 30% were women. TikTok had the highest percentage of female influencers at 45%, but men still made up a larger percentage of the biggest influencer accounts at 50%. The biggest gender gap was on YouTube, where 68% of the influencers were male and just 28% were female. The report also found that 27% of the influencers were right-wing, while 21% were left-wing, with the remainder not expressing an explicit political orientation. TikTok was the only site where explicitly left-leaning influencers made up a larger percentage of influencers at 28% compared to 25% who were right-leaning on the platform. About 77% of influencers had no past affiliation with a news organization, while 23% have previously been employed by a traditional news outlet in some way, according to Pew. And it's those 23% who were the least likely to express an explicit political affiliation. Bhutan, the tiny kingdom that introduced gross national happiness to the world, is facing an existential crisis as young people are leaving the country in record numbers. Despite free healthcare, free education, a rising life expectancy, and an economy that's grown over the last 30 years, people are still leaving. Prime Minister Tshering Tobgay believes it is ironically the success of gross national happiness that has made young Bhutanese so sought after abroad. Bhutan, which is about the size of Maryland, was largely isolated from the rest of the world for centuries. The kingdom was so protective of its unique Buddhist culture that it only started allowing foreign tourists to visit in the 1970s and didn't introduce television until 1999. Bhutan's fourth king, Jigme Singye Wangchuck, set Bhutan onto its path toward modernity in the 1970s by coining the phrase, "Gross national happiness is much more important to us than gross national product." Maximizing gross national happiness became a primary responsibility of Bhutan's government, led today by Prime Minister Tshering Tobgay. Every 5 years, surveyors fan out across Bhutan, measuring the nation's happiness. The results are analyzed and factored into public policy. Bhutan is currently facing a crisis of outmigration, with a devastating 9% of the country's population, most of them young people, having left. Bhutan's government has mobilized, with the king launching a bold, high-stakes plan to lure people back. Prime Minister Tobgay is trying to attract more business and tourists to Bhutan, highlighting landmarks like a centuries-old suspension bridge, part of an ancient 250-mile trail from one end of the country to the other that is now open to trekking tourists. The king is also creating a new city in southern Bhutan with different rules from the rest of the country. It will be an attempt at a new model of robust economic development while still holding true to Bhutanese values. The king is calling it the Gelefu Mindfulness City. He turned to Danish architect Bjarke Ingels to design it. The new city will have neighborhoods nestled between the area's many rivers, connected by a series of unusual bridges. The bridges will also act as public buildings, with one home to a Buddhist center, another to healthcare facilities, and yet another a university. There won't be any skyscrapers, and everything will be built with local materials. The success of the project will shape the future of Bhutan. Reported by Leslie Stahl. MIT engineers have developed a new solar-powered desalination system that can produce large quantities of clean water despite variations in sunlight throughout the day. The system uses a control strategy called flow-commanded current control to adjust to changes in sunlight in real time, maximizing the utility of solar energy. Unlike other solar-driven desalination designs, the MIT system requires no extra batteries for energy storage or a supplemental power supply. The engineers tested a community-scale prototype on groundwater wells in New Mexico over 6 months, producing up to 5,000 liters of water per day while harnessing over 94% of the electrical energy generated from the system's solar panels. The system is geared towards desalinating brackish groundwater, which is more prevalent than fresh groundwater resources, and could provide much-needed drinking water at low costs for inland communities where access to seawater and grid power are limited. The research was reported by Jennifer Chu and published on the MIT News website. In the ongoing battle against antibiotic-resistant superbugs, researchers have uncovered an unexpected vulnerability that could change how we fight these deadly infections. The discovery comes at a crucial time, as drug-resistant infections already claim over 1 million lives annually, with deaths projected to nearly double to 2 million per year by 2050. A team led by researchers at the University of California, San Diego found that antibiotic-resistant bacteria have an inherent weakness, one that might explain why these seemingly unstoppable superbugs haven't completely taken over. The team studied a common bacterium called Bacillus subtilis, focusing on why antibiotic-resistant strains don't always dominate their non-resistant counterparts. They discovered that in resistant bacteria, essential cellular components called ribosomes become unusually greedy for magnesium, a vital mineral. This creates internal competition with ATP molecules, essentially the cell's energy currency, which also need magnesium to function. This finding suggests a new way to fight resistant bacteria without using traditional antibiotics. Scientists might be able to target this weakness by manipulating magnesium levels in bacterial environments, potentially stopping resistant strains while leaving beneficial bacteria unharmed. The discovery is part of a broader push to find drug-free alternatives to fighting bacterial infections. In a separate study last October, the same team also developed a bioelectronic device that uses bacterial electrical activity to combat infections, successfully reducing the harmful effects of a common hospital-acquired infection. By understanding and exploiting these natural vulnerabilities, researchers may have found a new way to turn the tide in the fight against antibiotic resistance, without adding more antibiotics to our already oversaturated environment. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Chaos Theory, the news as seen by AI, on this 20th of November, 2024. I'm your host, Beatrix Kiddo. We hope you found today's news summary informative and engaging. Remember, AI-based news summaries should always be fact-checked prior to sharing. We encourage all our listeners to stay informed and verify the news from multiple sources. On this day in history, in 1945, the Nuremberg trials began. It was a significant event that marked the prosecution of prominent members of the political, military, and economic leadership of Nazi Germany. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow for more news as we continue to bring you the latest updates from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Until then, stay curious and informed. Goodbye.